On Tuesday, President Trump said the United States will withdraw from the Iranian nuclear agreement and reimpose sanctions on Iran. President Trump first floated the idea of withdrawing from the agreement reached by former President Barack Obama as a presidential candidate. What will this action by the president mean, and what will the fallout be? David Mendikoff, Director of Middle Eastern Studies at UMass Amherst, sat down with me to analyze the situation.
So Iran was doing two things in the region, in the Middle East and the world, that were frustrating for most countries. I mean, one, it was very involved in regional politics, and two, it was building a nuclear weapon, and that was very clear.
And when you say regional politics, you mean supporting terrorism among other groups?
Well, I mean, Iran has an ideology that's based on a particular version of Islam, which is a minority version, and Iran was helping groups throughout the region that represented that vision of Islam. I wouldn't call it, terrorism. But in terms of the nuclear thing, the way to stop countries from going nuclear usually is some sort of global consensus where there's both an incentive and a disincentive. And so for many years, everything had been focused on disincentives, threatening Iran, trying to starve Iranian people through sanctions. And what happened in 2015 is that for a long time, there had been sort of an effort to put a very tight international diplomatic agreement in place where countries would all play by the same rules, namely if Iran really was willing to give up developing a nuclear weapon and putting itself under very strict monitoring, Iran could then start to benefit from doing trade and being able to sell its oil, and other countries in the West would also be able to benefit from doing commerce with Iran. And what we've seen, and there's a great piece in this week's Economist on this, is that treaties really are the way to stop countries from developing nuclear weapons. Countries don't have a lot of incentives not to develop nuclear weapons because they know that gives them a kind of military edge. But treaties have been the thing that can do it. And in 2015, basically Western countries and China and Russia were all lined up with the same purpose, that they would agree to loosen sanctions if Iran put itself under a very strict regime to stop the weapons, and that's what happened.
And so that's how we find ourselves, here in present day. And this was all sort of happening as in the United States, the election was playing out. So we heard then candidate Trump at that time say that he thought this deal was horrible, it was not something that he would sign on to, and that when he was elected, if he were elected, he would immediately get rid of this deal. Now, that didn't happen immediately, right? As I understand it, the Trump administration, the State Department, was actually still working under diplomatic channels to sort of strengthen the pieces of the deal that the president didn't like. Is that correct?
Yeah, and of course, there's a big misconception in what seems to be the Trump administration's current attitude and Trump's initial feelings about this, which is somehow having an agreement to stop Iran from developing a nuclear weapon was going to also stop Iran from doing other things politically. I mean, most of the president's complaints have been along the lines that, Iran is a bad actor in the world. This was a nuclear weapons agreement, and Iran has stuck to the deal. I mean, and so somehow the idea that this would spill immediately over into, changing Iranians' external politics was never what anybody involved with the deal thought. The only way that would work would be over time you build confidence because the hostility is ratcheted down a notch with this agreement. But so I think it's important to underscore, as 95% of people involved in foreign policy or more have done, that this was agreement about stopping Iran from building a nuclear bomb. It worked. And Trump's objections really don't make a whole lot of sense, but that's certainly what he's been voicing.
And among his objections were the fact that Iran continued to support terrorist groups elsewhere and sort of, as President Trump had said in one way or another, fan the flames of terrorism across the world. That was a chief concern of his. Is not yours a concern of yours?
Well, I want to be, this is something that I think is really important. The word terrorism has no meaning. I mean, terrorism really seems to apply to countries doing things that the United States doesn't love. It really doesn't have any meaning. Iran pursues an aggressive foreign policy in the Middle East that attempts to bolster Shia minority, Muslim groups, that is absolutely opposed to the state of Israel, which, many people in the region sadly continue to see as a sort of foreign transplant. And, that's certainly contentious in many ways. But, terrorism has no meaning to me. I mean, Iran pursues a foreign policy that in many ways is contrary to Israeli or Saudi Arabian foreign policy. The Trump administration has very much aligned itself strongly, and again sometimes what our European allies want with foreign policy of Saudi Arabia and Israel. And in that sense, Iranian foreign policy from the Saudi perspective, which has its own agenda, and from the Israeli perspective, which, like the US at the moment, really thinks about military over everything, those things are, where Trump's aligning himself. But I mean, terrorism doesn't really have much to say. Yes, Trump, to the extent that I think he understands Iran at all, honestly, does not like Iranian foreign policy in the world. But this agreement never had anything to do with that. And the only way you moderate countries' foreign policy is by talking to them and working with them.
Great. And so let's look at the fact that now President Trump has said the United States is withdrawing from this Iran deal. What does that in effect do? Because these other countries, Britain, Germany, Russia, and two others, they'll still be signed on to this agreement. So the U.S. leaving that, couldn't that mean that the deal could move forward amongst other countries?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you build a boat and suddenly there's a huge leak in the boat, and
meaning the U.S. leaving, causing this huge leak.
And what I mean by that is that this was meant to be very clearly, gradually integrating Iran a little bit back into the global economic system, which generally speaking, the entire post-World War II international system was built on the idea that if countries are talking to each other and integrated into a global economy, that's where they can actually argue and fight in a reasonably kind of constrained way rather than going to war all the time. And so Europe is going to seek to continue that because it's both advantageous economically and the idea that you can actually push against Iranian policies that people don't like by talking to them, in a room rather than shouting at them and threatening to bomb them, is, sort of tried and true policies. So what's going to happen is that they will, I'm sorry, just to finish answering your question, they are going to try, Europe is going to try to keep this going, Iran is going to try to keep this going, and the question is whether the leak is too big to make, to keep this boat going.
And so how long do you think it will be before we know whether or not that, the U.S. withdrawing from this deal is going to, in effect, ruin the entire thing or not?
Well, I think it's likely to undermine it substantially. We've seen the Trump administration say that they're also threatening to punish countries that continue to work with Iran, which is all of our allies, Russia and China. And they're going to keep working with Iran, these countries. And in a lot of ways, I think economically, the U.S. is shooting itself in the foot because, by denying the opportunity to work with Iran, to sell things to Iran, and by making things worse with our allies in terms of trade, we're just hurting our own economy. But I think that it is not looking good.
Professor, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks.